Okay, okay, excellent. So I want to welcome everyone tonight. And before I say a few things, I do want to turn it over to the town manager to announce the protocols for the meeting.
Yes, so as everybody heard, the meeting's being recorded. So we'll have it available for folks to access on the town website and on the YouTube channel after the fact. Some housekeeping stuff. So from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, we have scheduled our budget work session. So the council's going to review the first draft of the budget. We have a second budget work session scheduled for a week from today at the same time. Tonight at 7, then the council will have a truncated regular work session to touch on a couple of topics ahead of the April council meeting. So tonight will be led in part by the budget committee chair, Ann Bolton, who is joining us today. I also wanted to note and thank John Medalia, who is a member of the budget committee, and Peter Tynan, who has also stepped in to assist the budget committee and who is tentatively on the April consent agenda to officially join the committee, but Peter has lent his expertise and already been a valuable contributor to the budget. We also have a couple of residents here who are interested in the budget talk, so thank you, Phil and Kumar, for joining us. I think typically we do limit discussion to the council just to and the budget committee members to facilitate discussion and make sure we're having an efficient discussion. But the budget is a public document. Resident input is part of the process, and so the schedule is for the budget to be introduced in April, and there is a public meeting, a public hearing before it's officially adopted by ordinance in May. So as I said, resident inputs and resident involvement is welcome. Committees have already helped be a part of this budget process by submitting their own requests as part of projects and operating expenses that are part of their mission. And the last thing I'll say is just if for some reason we get interrupted in a disruptive way that doesn't allow us to continue on with the meeting, I'll just cut the meeting. I'll then send out a new link to the town. We can reconvene so we can carry on as scheduled. With that, I will turn it over to
Okay, thank you. So also don't Mr. Town Manager, thank you for that, and also mention that those that are not participating in the meeting should block their video.
Oh yeah, thank you. I'll try to do that myself, but if I turn off your video, it's not because we don't like seeing your shining face. It's just to follow the conversation. The recording works better if it's limited to just the people taking part in the discussion. So
and then right, and also if people have a question, they can
Yep. The chat function is working, so always feel free to send me a question through the chat, and I'll try to answer it as promptly as I can for you.
Okay, so before I turn it over to the president who'll be overseeing the meeting, I do want to say, as I say every year to the council, thank you for your engagement in this most important function of the council, and it really leads to a more efficient government. And so thank you so much. And of course, Matt already thanked the outstanding budget committee who've done so much of the work before tonight. So thank you. And now I leave it to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we'll get this kicked off. Do I And do you want to introduce it?
Sure, I'm happy to, and I don't know, Matt, did everybody else get the talking points?
I did, yep,
Okay.
I included that in the, I didn't print it off, but
Okay.
it was included in the drive packets, just
So I
the.
thought I would just quickly go through the talking points. We thought from a process standpoint that it would be best to try to use this meeting if we are time crunched to focus really on the revenue assumptions and the operating expenses. And then use the next week's working session to look at the CapEx and the reserve levels. Because that's sort of kind of how everything flows through. But obviously, if we rush through this, we can tackle whatever, and nobody is restricted from asking any questions about any part of it. It just from a process standpoint, that's kind of what we thought. So as a reminder, the budget committee's charter is very narrow. So our job is simply to assist the town with forecasting revenues, property tax revenue and income tax revenue. And then it's the town manager who works directly with the committees and with the town council to recommend operating and capital expenses. So this budget draft that you've seen is reflective of that work, that combined effort. Just some highlights of the assumptions that you will see with the current rate of revenue growth that we have forecasted relative to the operational and CapEx expenditures. The budget committee is recommending removing the 12-cent property tax increase that was originally approved last year to go into effect this year and going forward. It's just no longer fiscally necessary, but we can talk through sort of some other issues related to that for the council to think about and tackle maybe at a future time. Inflation rates are pegged to the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-year T-bills, as we did last year. For purposes of the fiscal year 25 budget, what that practically means is that we're assuming a 4.9% inflation rate for both revenue and for many of the operating expenses. The 5-year budgeting of capital expenses right now reflects the town manager's analysis of our ongoing maintenance refurbishment requirements based on history. So he went back and looked at sort of kind of what is the typical and normal upkeep, in addition to what the committees have asked for and recommended in terms of capital expenditures. You will see that one of our recommendations is that additional capital budgeting planning happen for this coming fiscal year in a more detailed way. The rainy day fund, we are recommending it increase to 11.4 months of operating expenses in fiscal year 25, and that it achieves the town's stated goal of 12 months operating expenses in the fiscal year 26 budget and thereafter. And that's mainly because of the level of reserves that are there, including, the unencumbered reserves staying at the 2 months level. And then the special capital fund has some additional money in it in the event that there are additional capital expenditure requirements, which we do anticipate as you get into more capital planning. So obviously this is a working draft and we expect a lot of feedback and pushback, and we'll adjust accordingly. So with that said, just to run through our preliminary analysis and recommendations, we are projecting fiscal year 24 actual income tax revenue with a high confidence rate to be about $261,000 higher than what was, as many will remember, our conservative budget estimate for fiscal year 24. So, I mean, this is a good news story, obviously, that we're talking about positive, but it's interesting because it's higher than we had budgeted, but it by no means followed the trend of the fiscal year 23 actuals, because the January number, which was that sort of outlier, is proving to be exactly that, an outlier and not a new trend. But we still think that having a second data point suggests that some of our structural concerns that we had flagged previously are perhaps not coming to fruition, and things seem to be on a positive trajectory. So with that, the budget committee is recommending that we forecast fiscal year 25 income tax revenue based off of the fiscal 24 projected actuals at the rate of inflation, so 4.9% increase. Just, you know, to the extent that people are interested, I was kind of looking at the Montgomery County numbers, and I think that we're sort of within the realm, even though our income tax base, I think, is, you know, I would say more favorable than the county as a whole, but I feel very comfortable with that number, but open to other people's suggestions on that. For fiscal year 25 property tax revenues, we are projecting them to be 7.2% higher in fiscal year 24 compared to fiscal year 23. And this is basically John Medallia on the budget committee, who's become a bit of our in-house expert on property taxes. You know, did the heavy lift of getting all of the house by house data and the utilities taxable, you know, assessment from the county and what they call sort of the public property taxes from the county, and did a bottom-up build of kind of what our actuals are projected to be. And it's much higher than we had originally forecast. So with that, we are recommending that the fiscal year 25 property tax be 7.2% higher based on that higher level of actuals that we expect for fiscal year 24. There will be a reassessment of the entire town that will happen, that is happening this year, that will affect our tax year 25 numbers, which will be our fiscal year 26. But for purposes of this analysis, I would say most of our growth we would project from ongoing improvements and subsequent reassessment. So basically, anytime somebody does a major renovation of their home, the county comes in, reassesses the value of that, and immediately puts that reassessed value into effect. So they don't wait for the 3-year cycle. So we think that that's where the bulk of our growth in property taxes is going to come from. And in fact, again, I looked at sort of what the county is projecting, and the county executive has proposed a budget to the council that keeps property tax revenue flat. Now, whether the you know, county council accepts that or not, you know, is obviously up for them to debate. But I think that based on that we can expect to be in that range of 2.5% to 3.5% property tax growth based on that. And that's very consistent with what the county is projecting, even without raising property taxes. So for the 5-year budget, one thing that we wanted to flag is that income tax revenue, because we've taken out the property tax, the projected raise in property taxes, that income tax revenue is projected to be 67% of total town revenue versus 29% from property taxes. And our recommendation is still to keep that property tax rate flat at the 10%. I mean, sorry, 10 cents on every $100 of assessed value for the current 5-year budget. But we would urge the council to look at that number and that mix of revenue, because as everybody knows, and we actually lived through this, income tax revenue is much more volatile than property tax revenue. And so when you start to have 2/3 of your revenue coming from a volatile revenue base, it gets a little bit nerve-wracking and creates a little bit of extra risk in how the town has to manage its finances. The good news is we have very healthy reserves and are projecting very healthy reserves, but it's just something to look at, and you can benchmark it against other towns and sort of what their mix is, and maybe make a determination that some nominal property tax increase might be needed in the future, particularly as these capital expenditure plans get projected out with a lot more detail. I'm kind of going through this, but anybody should interrupt me. Any questions, comments?
I was just wondering if you should pause now.
Yeah.
And take questions, comments on the rest.
I have a question. I grew up in this very conservative, became to money household. And I guess when I looked at that we weren't going to raise the property tax, I was thinking, is that really prudent? What if, you know, and you just said about, you know, the income tax is what's really volatile. You know, what if we really needed the money? Because we do have these capital projects. And as I read through so many of the documents for later on, it's like sidewalks, this, that. You know, I just wonder if it just isn't prudent for us to raise it. It's 2 cents.
I think it would be, well, I mean, that's really for you guys to debate. I mean, I just can only say that from a fiscal standpoint, it's not needed when you're talking about the level of reserves that we have. I think the capital plans need more thought to them. I think they need to be looked at. How do we take every major asset in town and develop a 5 and 10-year plan for maintaining and refurbishing so that we have a really clear understanding of when those costs need to come in, and then have that conversation, but that's really for you guys to
Yeah.
decide and debate.
I think the bottom line is for this coming fiscal year, we don't need to.
Okay.
And I think by the end of the next 12-month period, we'll have a better sense of our long-term capital plans. Matt has already started the process. And then we'll have a better understanding of what we really need on the revenue side. I think Anne is making another point. So there's sort of what we need for projected capital expenses, but also structurally, the fact that we are reliant on income tax is something we should confront. And we may want to confront it now, this sort of 2-3 year period when we are fiscally in a good position. Because if we, 2 or 3 very wealthy people leave our town, we will suddenly see that hit in our income, in our revenue. And it might be too late for us to adjust then. So I think she's talking about a structural readjustment that may be independent of our actual expense needs. So again, we don't need to do it this year, but it's a topic I think we should take on over the next 12 months.
Because like, so if I read this right, so this income tax for fiscal year 23 was 1.7, and that was that higher, like that weird thing with the
Yeah, With the
taxes.
January reconciliations.
And then
Last
our
year's.
projected for this year is 1.468.
Yeah,
And then next year, we're proposing 1.54.
yeah, to grow by the rate of inflation, correct.
Okay, and then
And
1.6.
if I can just add really quickly, also those projection, the way that our income tax comes in, we get them in kind of big bunches throughout the year, and that number is often an exact duplicate of what we've received previously.
So
we
that
have a pretty-
1.54 is a pretty good number.
We have
Of
a
what?
Yeah, the fiscal year 24 number, I mean, there's basically one more distribution that could vary by a couple of $1,000s, but that's it.
I mean, I guess I kind of agree, like, I don't, well, I don't know, my company certainly doesn't raise my salary fast enough, but like, I think that, as we go out to these years, there are pretty big increases, like on top of each other for these income taxes, so, to your point, like, that those seem, much heavier than we've probably ever had, right?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that because we're applying the inflation rate to both the revenue and the operating side, you're sort of, if
If one goes better.
Yeah, I mean, if inflation comes down, your operating expenses are in theory gonna go down, and then,
Okay,
it's gonna feel less dramatic, I guess is what I would say.
yeah, yeah,
Also the instability in income tax that we've seen over the last few years is actually a function of the controller's office's own problems, not our town. I learned at the December legislative breakfast from Controller Terry Lehrman that office was still using COBOL. As far as I know, it's still using COBOL. Those of you who don't know COBOL, it was the programming language used in the 1970s and 1980s.
It still existed.
Replaced
A lot of government systems.
by multiple different systems since then. So when they got the tax law of 2018 in, they tried to program the changes in COBOL, and it just was awful trying to do it. So they couldn't do it. It took them 2 years to sort that out. And they finally sorted it out in it came through with our fiscal year 23 numbers. And what they did was they gave us all the extra income from partnerships that was in 23. So that bulked up. In reality, we didn't have that instability. It was their problem. So yes, we rely on income tax, and income tax can go up and down But in fact, the instability in the recent years was not caused by.
Oh, that's really helpful to know because we knew that that change in that partnership thing had something to do with it, but had no idea if that was an ongoing thing, but here it's like a programming problem.
It was, well, COBOL.
Yeah.
I think the question now, council, is any sort of concerns broadly on the income tax and property tax projections fiscal year 25. Doesn't sound like there are any major questions or concerns from that.
No, I want to follow up on the comment about the structural issues, which I interpret or understand to be a small number of high net worth individuals in the town or high income individuals and families in the town. There's privacy, we don't want to, can't name any names, but do you have a sense of how many households we're talking about, or what percentage of the town's
Yeah, we,
income tax comes from this small set?
yes, we had that number. We had it last year.
Yeah.
So we haven't refreshed that for this year, but we can pull up the numbers from last year and it's fairly concentrated for
Yeah,
sure.
right, I mean, I'm prior budget committee, so I know a number of these details. We are a very asymmetric town, much like the country as a whole.
Yeah.
That is, that we have some very high earners who are contributing a substantial portion of our income tax revenue. And they're just a handful of people. None of
Yeah.
the rest of us portion are just getting our.
It's a meaningful concentration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
I can look up that
But we
data.
should probably get the latest number, but it's a meaningful concentration.
Sorry.
Okay, I want to say,
Oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to say one thing on this topic. So I think that, in the past, we've always had an outstanding relationship with the previous comptroller. And we've held meetings. So I don't know if the committee has met with the staff of the new controller or not, but I recommend that be done, during this year. Thank you.
Thank you. We have not, mainly because this was the least confusing year, at least since I've been on the budget committee in terms of property and income taxes, but, which is why we spent a lot of time looking at before, but I agree with the mayor that the county, they've been very helpful in the past. So by all means, we should absolutely do that. I just looked this over, just look this up for folks. So that they are aware. So basically, depending on how you define high net worth, I don't really, for purposes of this, 30% of our returns are returns with earning $500,000 or less in income. And then it jumps up for the 500,000 to $1 million, it's another 20%. And then for the very highest earners, sorry, that's the amount of income. So in terms of the number, yes. So in terms of the number of returns, let's see, percentage of returns. So it's only 4% of returns are at the highest bracket, the greater than 2 million. So 4% of the entire town's returns.
15,000.
15, 16, 17.
Yeah.
It is concentrated. Okay.
But that's not as bad as like, I was thinking like 3,
Right.
or something like, I mean.
Yeah.
17 is, I mean,
It's a little better than it was. In other words, our very wealthy households are increasing.
yeah,
They are. No, that is Rob,
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah, I mean, this is last year's, which means that it was actually the year before,
Yeah.
so it's probably looks very different when we get, because they're always perpetually a year behind. on getting
Yeah.
us that information.
yeah, it would be
so.
interesting to see if that number grows of the number of people that are, your households that are making that. Which would be a great trend for, that would
Yeah.
impact, I think, the numbers that are allotted on here for income tax. Like if next year, we have 22 households that's happening, that's just
Yeah.
gonna further kind of help everyone.
So what I, for me, sanity checking against what the county executive is submitting is kind of just like are we in the ballpark? Does it seem reasonable? So the county saw a lot of kind of the trends that we're seeing, even though obviously we know our town is sort of a hyper concentrated version of what the county trends are. But the county overall saw a 6% increase in property taxes over fiscal year budgeted. So their fiscal year 24 actual was 6% higher than their fiscal 24 budgeted. The county executive over that actual new number is assuming a 3.6% increase, even though he's saying property tax should stay flat. So I think, we're assuming anywhere from 2.5% to 3.5% over the course of the budget. So that feels reasonable and probably conservative because again, it's this constant improvement, upgrades of houses and reassessment. And who knows, they may still raise our property taxes because that still has to go through the council process. So
Do they really come out and check after each house had a permit?
that's what they have to file for a permit and then they have to file to sort of say we're done with the project and it's been inspected. So
This was interesting is when I renovated my house, it was a long time ago. It didn't catch up to me for years.
yeah,
They are slow.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I think they're faster when it's a whole house renovation or a tear down because basically the assessed value of the property goes to zero and then
Yeah.
obviously they
Right.
pay attention to those ones that are
Yeah.
zero.
Yeah.
And then, you build something new and that, they tend to lock in on that. So I think,
Well, you're giving us another reason to renovate rather than build new.
Yes, it's a good one. No, I had a whole house renovation and it took them years to catch up to me. I was happy.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's the income. I'm gonna, I'll give a top line of the operating expenses and then, Matt, I assume you might get some questions here. So right now, the fiscal year 25 operating expenses are budgeted to increase by 12.2% overall. And unlike, driven by inflation, but unlike last year where we had some staffing and personnel, it's a lot of actual cost increase, maintenance costs, professional services costs associated with permitting and council hearings. And probably most importantly, anticipated increases in sanitation expenses, so trash and recycling. And this is based on data that Matt has gathered from neighboring municipalities as their contracts are coming due. The cost increase are substantial.
Interesting.
Is it only trash?
It's mostly trash because it's related to dumping fees increasing, and this is happening nationwide. But it's also labor costs, so that's why it does impact recycling and yard waste pickup as well. So we've structured our contract previously, with one company to provide all of them. Which is similar to what our neighboring municipalities have done. The town of Chevy Chase, for example, they have a new contract that just kicked in this year, and it was a 50% increase over the last year. And so I had been hearing horror stories about this happening, and hoping that maybe our timing would work out, that we would skate through a volatile and difficult time.
It is a reason to try to get multiple bidders. so we can-
That's one of the keys, is that the worst, so I mean, there are stories of certain towns that are paying double what they did before. But it is often that they have one or only two bids. So I think our current contract is ending right around the same time our fiscal year is ending. One of the things that might happen is we are open-minded about days that pickups happen, which is disruptive, but could save us a lot of money in the long run. So just keeping that in mind as that comes forward.
To be clear, we are budgeting for the increase. But you're also saying we could potentially save by,
Having
bidding out
multiple
or changing the terms of the contract.
Yeah, I think that based on what we've seen in our neighboring municipalities, it's prudent to expect an increase, and so we've been following the same principles we've done historically. We want to be conservative with that and anticipate a big increase. There's a chance that it won't come in quite as high. Hopefully it won't, but regardless, I think we're in what we're looking at here. And if you look at the summary page that I printed off, and you're just looking at the red column is our projected budget. The line where it's showing 70,000 sanitation, you see that huge increase. And then just going down the line, the others are relatively stable. So that's really the big,
So from the 226 to 333?
exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So that's our big operational expense.
And it's a combo of the 48% assumed increase for trash and recycling, right? But then there's also the composting increase.
Yeah, which is
An environment committee recommendation.
Yeah.
To that all houses adopt composting, which would increase that expense line item from $34,000 to $72,000.
So
Where
that-
do you see that?
It's in the.
that's in
It's in the
that's in
detail.
the detail.
Oh, okay.
But-
Detail, sorry.
Okay,
But
okay.
it's summarized in
Okay.
Annex notes.
So-
Yeah, yeah.
So you're saying we should, this budget reflects that we are including all houses. But do all houses I guess a two-part question, do we pay for all houses and then some don't do it because they don't want to do it? Or can people still opt in, opt out, so we pay less?
But the proposal on the table, actually, at the work session tonight is an alternative. In other words, people can say no, so it's unlikely we're going to get everybody to sign up, but the putting in the big number means that we're covered.
Okay,
Yeah.
but if we have less, we pay less.
Yes.
Yes.
So our recommendation is to keep this conservative as proposed. Obviously evaluate opportunities to reduce certain things. I mean, I think Matt just talked about that. There's also the question of professional fees associated with the permitting and how to get those back down to more manageable levels. And then, as Robin pointed out, consider an opt-in approach, which it sounds like they're doing for composting.
Matt, do you want to just give a bit more detail on the permitting professional services? What happened last year and what you're budgeting for next year?
Yeah, so
Services for the-
I didn't include that quite yet, so that we could sort of focus on the big picture first, but the idea that we adopted last year, which I think makes sense, would be to do kind of our annual evaluation of our fee schedule with the budget. And to update and adopt that as necessary. I think the big one that we're missing right now that needs to be updated, let me take a step back. All of them should be updated. The last time we did a comprehensive overhaul of our fee schedule and really benchmark them,
The consultant fee schedule.
were a couple of years, where it was 2022. So or 2021, excuse me. So we didn't do it last year, we didn't do it the year before. So we're a couple of years behind. This is the schedule for renovations, for dumpsters on your property, everything. I think the big one where we're missing, not just needs to be updated, but missing is that since we've updated our code with the new stormwater regulations, we don't have a stormwater permitting cost. So I think that's one way to offset our stormwater review process, is to add a stormwater review permit.
So if someone is renovating a house, that would be a separate permit. So to say, or building a new house.
So
If they trigger the stormwater, like it has to be over 150 feet, right?
Right,
Yeah.
Feet and, if it's something like that.
so
Matt, you're talking about two things, right? You're talking about the fees we charge for permitting. The whole schedule that exists with
Mhm.
dumpster, so on, but there's also the fees for the services, our vendors. And the contracts for our vendors, right, that we use, that's also part of the cost increases that we are anticipating.
yeah, so
Two different things,
so
and you may want to say, talk about both of them with the council. You're talking about the first piece,
Ye-
which is what we charge permit applicants.
Yeah,
Right.
But there's also what we pay
yeah,
for our.
Like
vendor
Bayland.
services. Yes,
and Doug,
yes.
Yes, yeah, so those are, so there's a few, so we touched on trash recycling, so we had a 5-year contract for trash and recycling that's ending this year, so then we'll go out to bid competitively on that. A lot of our professional review services, that's wrapped up in the professional services line, so just looking at it at a high level, again, on the summary page. Under the expenses line, 62,000 professional services. So we do see a bit of a jump, but it sort of levels off in future years. That's. I think in general, what we're projecting is just in line with most of our other items, which is an increase relative to inflation. But to Kabir's point, all of these are bid out as well, so some of our de facto staff members are contracted, so that's something to keep in mind too, that's one way to also help ensure that our costs are staying reasonable, is to continue to competitively bid that and think about that too. And so when we're thinking about what we charge for our permitting fees, and I saw that Ron is with us, so he can maybe give more specific legal parameters of it. But the idea on our fees is not necessarily that it's covering everything or that the town is making money from it, but that we are recovering a reasonable portion of what it costs to administer that permitting review process. Ron, I don't know if you wanted to clarify or add or amend what I said to more accurately reflect what it really is.
No, that's it. State law does actually say, case law, that the fees for permits cannot result in a profit, otherwise it would be a tax. And municipalities in Maryland only have limited taxing authority. The permit fees can help offset the actual costs for administering the program. As a practical matter, they can't offset 100% of the fees because that would be likely unduly burdensome on applicants because the fees would have to be very high. It's generally recognized that there's a cost to the town for doing certain businesses, including operating a permitting program.
Okay, I also want to add one, I want to add one comment to that is, and this is why we do this wonderful budget process. So information that the council needs when they can consider the fees is not only what are our fees now and how much does it cost us, but also we want to get from the staff information on what our rival towns are charging for such fees. Because so okay, that's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
exactly. That's exactly right. So I think when we're looking at our fees, one of the most important pieces of data is benchmarking it against our neighboring municipalities and making sure that it's area appropriate and reflective of what the cost of business is in the area.
Because we don't want someone to buy a house in Chevy Chase Village rather than Somerset because the fee is so much lower there for something.
And I guess just the last point I'll make is, so I noted that the professional services does bump up next year. That's reflected almost entirely because in next year's budget, we've set aside $45,000. $47,500 for a comprehensive code review. So that's where it's an extra $40,000 kind of higher. and then it levels back off to where we are. So that's why we see an increase in FY 25. I will say the other thing, you know, to think about and watch as, and this might be wrapped into that comprehensive code review, is that our professional services have gone up a lot over the last 5 years. And a lot of that is from our building administrator review and adding the stormwater review. So, and really mostly building review, to be honest. We haven't had that many big giant reviews with stormwater. We've had a handful, but so that's just one item that I think the town should keep an eye on to make sure that we're spending it responsibly, that we're
Shorter meetings.
shorter meetings, yeah, whatever it is. There's a few elements
But
baked
did
with
you
it.
see, I would imagine you saw an increase in the number of projects overall, though. I mean, was there some pent up demand there, just based on the timing of?
Well, yeah,
COVID,
that's a good point, is that, you know, one of the reasons it's so low in FY 21, 20, and still in 22, and why it's seen a pretty, we saw a big increase in FY 23 is because we started to see more projects, and then this year it's more, but
But we're staying at the higher level.
but the point I think does still stand. It's not that anything's wrong, but just an expense that is continuing to go upward, that it bears watching and
Are
evaluating.
permit fees high enough?
No,
That's the bottom.
Okay, that was easy.
come top.
That was easy, but,
We 2 years ago decided we would use the budget process to review our fees and propose increases if we thought it appropriate. So, you know, we can at this time do that. So, it would be good to know what our neighbors are paying.
yeah, I can, I'll make sure you have something.
and are there different permit fees for a new build versus a renovation?
Yes, so what we've done in the past is, what our current fee schedule does is there is a flat fee for new construction. So that includes your, well, let me start by saying, for renovations, the way it's determined is a fee based on the square footage that's being renovated. And then for new construction, there's just a flat fee. So, I think both of those can probably be increased again to account for inflation and to make sure that we're consistent with our rival towns. But also, I think stormwater, making sure stormwater.
Should it be adjusted vis-a-vis what our professional fees have adjusted up to? Because we need more of them, that should play into the price.
That's the point we are making, is that we can make it cost recoverable. We cannot make money off of
Right.
the fees, but we can make it cost recoverable.
What if we started to charge a fee for variance requests?
We do, but we could increase that to try to discourage variance requests.
Right. Just curious about the enforcement officer and building administrator expenses.
Mhm.
Who is our enforcement officer? I didn't think we had an enforcement officer anymore. So who are we paying this money to?
Yeah, so let me.
That's us.
So
Parking.
we do still have a contract with Wayne.
Oh, okay, we
So
do.
he's still,
I
we've
just-
significantly reduced his hours, but he's still under contract with us, so periodically he does
That
still.
answers that question. The building administrator at these levels, I would think we should certainly consider hiring a recent college graduate who's an engineer to review these plans. And we could probably have a full-time individual for $60,000-80,000 a year who would walk around the town every day and do all this stuff. Not charge us extra hours for these long meetings. And there might be some trade-offs, but I just, that's. That
Right.
particular professional service strikes me as very large and maybe not where we want to be spending our resources.
not clear to me whether it's a role one can easily fill, but I appreciate that point. It's not. We've been at this point before.
Right, and Doug has a professional engineer, I mean, he's a certified professional engineer, he brings a lot of experience.
Used
I'm
by
not
the
sure we need all
towns.
that experience.
Yeah.
The county improves all of the core stuff. I'm just saying, I think it's near remove that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, that was it for now, keep going.
No, I think that sort of sums up at least
Yeah.
where we are at that point. I'll turn it back over to.
Yep,
Ann.
so the fiscal year 25 capital expenditures are budgeted at $1.1 million, primarily for investments in streets, curbs, stormwater mitigation and planning. Those categories are 70% of the total. As we mentioned earlier, Matt really took a hard look at what are sort of our ongoing maintenance, refurbishment and upgrades of town's physical assets, and really tried to reflect that in the forward-looking capital planning for the 5-year plan. And just to give an example is, when would the tennis court need to be resurfaced, and do we have that in there? And what's sort of, now that we've done this major renovation of the pool, let's make sure we're budgeting for ongoing maintenance of the pool deck, things like that. Our recommendation is to kind of take that to the next level over the next year, to really look at all of the town's major assets and develop 5 and 10-year capital management plans for them. And just sort of, so you guys really have a full picture of what that is, because that will really inform the reserve levels and the discussion about property taxes versus income taxes.
Yeah, for sure. Cause like the tennis, I think they need to resurface it, I think this year, but then they don't, it's guaranteed for a full 6 years. And so.
So there might be ongoing, repainting lines.
but like,
I mean, I don't, there's gonna be small stuff, but I
Yeah.
think it's just. Right now, there's a little bit of, the committee kind of puts forward what they want, and it's a little bit more reactive planning, and I think there can be a little bit more of a. Let's just go asset by asset, and what's our plan for that, just like we're doing with streets and, some of the other things that are already budgeted, lighting. Which has somebody budgeted to look at that, some incremental lighting.
And the contract for the pool, I think includes that already for like a future plan.
Yeah, so for the pool, actually, the pool is actually one of the ones that's in the best shape, because when we did the renovation of the pool house. And now updated when we did the work now, we actually have a booklet that goes through all of the different equipment. And basically has a maintenance plan.
Yeah.
Into it, so the pool is one where we would like to get everything up to.
But I think Shannon's point is that the American Pool contract has their maintenance schedule part of it. That, fair to say.
That was my next question.
So I thought it's
who runs
just a.
the book?
Maybe that's the manual.
We,
I was thinking it.
we do budget separately, when equipment needs to be replaced, when the heater needs to be replaced,
But
when.
it doesn't cover.
We should
all
have
the
that,
maintenance.
like you said, for all assets.
Yeah.
like
Yes,
a
right,
manual.
exactly, yes, yeah, exactly.
The difference between operating and capital expenditure, maintenance would be an operating expenditure.
Right.
and
Yes.
Yes.
Replacing a heater is capital.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly, yeah.
So, and Matt and the budget committee took a first step at that, so in the file that you have, there's a tab that details all the town's assets. And so it takes the first tab, and for a number of the assets, there are historical figures, that's what Anne was saying.
Yeah.
In terms of what it has taken, what have been the replacement costs and so on, but not for all of the assets, but that's the exercise we have to complete over the next 12 months.
But was the pool done through that manual for this year?
Pool costs through that, right?
Yeah, the pool is in there, yep, yep.
And I will say, I'll make a little plug for a future, hopefully, budget committee member, Peter Tynan, who has a lot of expertise in this area and is really anxious to be helpful in capital budgeting for the town. And I think we should take him up. on that.
Bless it, bless it.
Yes. So,
That is true.
okay, so then, you know, from a reserves perspective, the conservative budgeting that we've done for the last several years, as well as the income tax ongoing recovery there over the last 2 years has really positioned the town well to have, to budget for healthy reserves for the full 5-year budget, including achieving our rainy day fund target by fiscal year 26. So the budget committee is recommending increasing the rainy day fund to 11.4 months for the fiscal year 25 budget. And then sustaining a 12-month level for the remaining 5-year plan. Unencumbered reserves will exceed for briefly the 2-month operating expenses in fiscal year 25, but then are roughly at or slightly below the target through fiscal year 29. Special capital fund reserves are budgeted at $200,000 for fiscal year 25 and $250,000 for the years after, in anticipation that a lot of this more detailed capital planning might push more things into specific line items. So that's our recommendation. I mean, what you're seeing in this draft budget is the budget committee's recommendations for the allocation of reserves. One thing we explored, because there were such healthy reserves, was at some point, does it make sense to pay down the pool house loan? You know, like, let's just look at that. Because if you're sort of looking for where to put reserves. So we looked at that, but when we looked at the numbers, and there is no prepayment penalty if the town were to pay down the loan. But right now, there are 7 more years of loan payments, so it ends in July 2030. And the interest rate is only 3.74%. And the money that the reserves are earning is 5.4%. So pretty much a no-brainer not to pay that down. But if you know, interest rates come down and the savings rate goes down, it might, and there's excess reserves, and the capital planning, you know, is, as you know, what is close to what we've budgeted. It might be something for the council to look at again.
So it was a 20-year loan, so last 7 years.
Good thing we didn't do it this year.
It's 790K.
Yeah,
So
well,
sad.
Yeah.
And the same idea applies for if you remember, we have a liability on the Wynn.
Oh, yeah, but that'll
Wynn
never make
case.
sense.
when does that go away?
Not until 2040, I think, something like that. I mean, it's
But you'll never want to pay that.
it's a
promise
it's
you.
a no
Yeah.
interest loan.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's no benefit to paying it off early, other than
Just
just
let it-
saying,
Let it run through.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't pay off that, you know, but
So we actually in a very good position from that perspective.
Yes,
It's a good thing.
yes, very healthy financial plan for the town. The final thing that the budget committee wanted to flag is just that the ARPA funds right now are currently projected to be fully expended against ARPA designated uses by the end of fiscal year 25. But the rules require that they actually be obligated by calendar year 2024. So by December 2024, they actually have to be obligated, meaning contracted to be spent. They can't just be budgeted. And that's really important for people to know, because we have about $489,000 in the fiscal year 25 planned. So we don't want to lose any of that money. The ARPA guidance, or what the government sent around from the Maryland Department of Budget and Management, they issued some guidance and said, you know, listen, most municipalities have actually selected the standard allowance or otherwise using revenue replacement as the standard because it's more flexible. We chose to go using ARPA designated use, which is fine. It's just that everybody needs to be very hyper-focused that if those things are not obligated, we will lose that money.
Well, especially with Matt's, you know, transition and stuff. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really important because we have to get that stuff.
So we have not explored if you can, at this point, take revenue replacement, because as you guys remember, when we looked at this a few years ago, the town could easily take the revenue replacement option. We more than met the criteria for that. There was just discussion that it would look bad, but as Maryland has said, the vast majority of municipalities are taking that option because it just provides a lot more flexibility. So we just want to flag it for everybody to keep an eye on.
I think we should put a deadline. I think you suggest that.
Yes, by the end of the third quarter.
Yeah.
so that you have
Of the
3 months
tax.
runway, making it.
For a
pretty-
fiscal year, third quarter of the calendar year, we should allocate it.
So
When is that?
had to be
September.
Yeah, but we have to have all of the proper, you know,
Budget lines.
like
Was.
proposals
No,
and
I
quotes
actually-
and all
I
of that.
actually-
And that's a lot. of work.
Basically, so as Ann said, there is an ARPA, in the file.
Yeah, there's a tab. there.
There's a tab that has ARPA, so the majority, so it's split up between the LED streetlight project is one.
Which is done,
Which that is,
meets the criteria.
that's
And paid for.
and paid for.
Are you looking at fiscal year 25?
I'm just looking at all.
I would just stick with the fiscal year 25 because what's already spent is spent
Fair.
and that doesn't matter. It's the 489 that we have to worry about.
So
So
Matt is looking at the tab in the actual
The-
Excel workbook that summarizes for submission to ARPA.
the big one is we have about $700,000 that's banked for street and sidewalk improvements. That we are hoping to use against ARPA. So to Ann's point, that money, we need to have a contract in place so that we would perform that work.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but we have spent some of that money, just to be 100% clear, right? No, I think it's only 400 or 500K that's outstanding, if I'm not mistaken. It's not 700.
Well,
It's the.
Yeah, yes,
It's hard to tell because it's, I mean, the ARPA's going on a calendar year, we're going on a fiscal year.
and also the way I broke it down is that we've allocated a larger chunk of money that could go to ARPA than what our actual ARPA.
Understood.
So
So you
yeah,
have to
yes.
adjust that a little bit, yeah.
So really, yes, subtract $400,000 from that, so more like $300,000 towards streets, sidewalk improvements. That we need to have either done by the end of this year. Or a contract in place that it will be done by 2026 with the dollar amount set.
Yeah, but it's a contract amount, so, yeah, I mean, you have until fiscal year or calendar year 2026 to actually finish the plan. But the point is, the state wants you to have contracted and obligated those funds
And
by
we
the
are
end
on-
of this year.
We are on track for it, let's just be 100% clear.
Yes.
Yeah, there's, there's been a master planning process, we're on track for it. But we just need to be aware that we're gonna run up against that.
Why wouldn't we try to take the money, see if we could change that where we just take it? So we don't have to worry about it.
We could, and in fact, if you'd like, what I can do is go into there and pull up what our report is. Basically, we need to do our FY20, it's done calendar year, so I could do our 2023 report. I can share that with you and show you exactly where we are. And I could even send you a proposal to.
But, I mean, I think that, you know, if you were talking to Kumar and like the Public Safety Committee, I mean, I do think that our streets have been neglected for a while
Yeah.
and we really do need to get like
Yes.
some of these better crosswalks and like, you know, all sorts of things. And so, I mean, it would be ideal if we could, you know, just start now and get some quotes for that
Yeah.
and get that allocated and spent.
Yep.
100%. I think your observation, the wrinkle is there will be there's a transition
Yeah.
with Matt leaving.
Right.
We
Yeah.
have to just,
And it
we all
takes
have to
time.
hold hands to make sure we can get that.
Yeah,
Right.
and you just
Yeah.
don't want it to fall through the cracks, that's all, because
Yeah.
the point is money is fungible, so. Like, you know, there's no question that we will spend the money and we need the money. There's
Yeah.
not it's just a question of basically. Dotting all the i's and
Yeah.
crossing the t's on the administrative side so that the state knows that that money will be used. By calendar year 2026, which there's no question it will be used by 2026, they just
Yeah,
have this arbitrary, you know, prove to us that you
So
will have
that's-
obligated the money.
That's why I say if we could get the money, put it in the bank. And then we could spend that money in a.
But yeah, but what you can't do, Debbie, is you can't really put it in the bank in the sense that the one thing that you're not allowed to use money for is in reserves. So that's why many towns used revenue replacement, because they basically, all you had to prove was that. Our revenues would have been higher had COVID not happened. which we could prove based on the data that we had. Like, we met all the criteria for that. So it gets more complicated when you use it for specific uses because you can't sit on the money in that scenario.
I think we should do like a bid for proposal that's like, you know, soon and get some,
In fact, yeah, that's one of the big projects that I'm hoping to hand off is take that.
yeah. And like maybe
take that-
EJ can be like heavily involved and
Exactly.
like
Started
that.
that.
So
Yeah.
we did the evaluation of the streets and sidewalks. I actually had a call with them last week about, okay, now now we need the plan. And part of that plan is write the bid out for us.
Yeah.
So then we get a contract in place that is gonna cover this.
Okay,
Right.
What we,
I
what
guess
we
we
should
should just proceed that way.
Right.
yeah, we just need to
Let's
start.
get
Yeah.
Get these streets and sidewalks.
Yeah,
There we go.
And I mean, it's good. It provides a little sense of urgency. I think it's.
yeah, I agree. I think it's
Agreed.
nice.
And
So-
if we do that.
So we won't be sitting here 20 years later with
And
new
if,
sidewalks.
and if we do that, we can shorten our conversation from 7 to 8, because it's all in there, okay?
Hey, that's much too late.
So that's, you know, obviously we'll take any of the updates and recommendations, and put it through the next draft. It sounded like you were gonna do some work on the fee schedule.
Yeah.
Matt, and deal with that. The only other thing that we wanted to flag is that normally we target an initial town journal article for April. Unfortunately, that deadline passed. And I thought, just because I've done this many times before, that I could go to Leslie late and say, hey, I'll get you something tomorrow. And she said, sorry, issue's closed. So it might be that, Matt, I just send you something that can be emailed around to the town as an interim. The other thing I wanted to flag is that, you know, the budget committee, we write up about the budget, but it's like wonky. It's only about the process in a very narrow charter. I would strongly urge that, you know, Kabir as the budget committee liaison and the mayor as the individual who's, you know, putting the blessing on the budget, that they co-author more of a, you know, a story kind of article for the journal. That's, here are our policy priorities and where we're investing in the town.
This is after. it's
For the May
adopted.
one,
That's
yeah,
after we
for the-
adopt it. Yeah.
Well, no, but not after you adopt it, when you introduce it to the
Introduce it.
town.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think that that's really honestly what people want to hear. They want to know sort of what are we investing in, and at the budget committee, I mean, we can't say any of those things, so that would be my recommendation.
No, this is Somerset and the state of our.
The state of the town.
That's right, get out your dust off your best
We can
political
start
day,
that line, Rob.
and you know, and
The
you know.
state of the union is strong.
Save the town.
Anyway,
Thank you. I had one question or comment. That's, the dollar amount is very small, it's sort of philosophical. I see the early bird swim. We're anticipating expenses of $2,256. But the fees we're planning to charge, we expect will bring in $2,400. Just as a matter of approach, I don't think we're trying to make these efforts money raising.
Fair enough. Okay,
Profitable.
I will,
You know,
I will
on-
double check that
on the other
and make
hand,
sure.
That's just it was probably just some sort of a tweak. in
On
percentage.
the other hand, I look at my green eye shades on. Of course, the fees are only covering the direct costs and not the indirect costs of that activity, which include the facilities. And as such, we're not covering the full expenses.
And that's
Right.
fair, but then from an
Yeah.
optic standpoint, we should be the same with some of the other pool activities.
No, thanks.
But
Yeah, no,
that's all. Like I
that's.
said, dollar amount is very small, but I know the pool generates lots of
What are
interest.
you saying, that, am I not understanding this, that it's gonna?
So this is the fees we just pay charging people that will
Right.
receive.
Right.
And if you go to page 8, you'll see how much we're budgeting it's gonna cost us.
Page 8, and where is
At the top, we're seeing early bird swim will be and the water aerobics. Saw the water aerobics somewhere, I don't know where.
Yeah, water aerobics is on page 7. So water aerobics is
Aerobics.
71.
4,200. But we're only expecting to bring in 2,800, so.
Those are numbers that I've been looking for. Because, no, because
I just,
we have said, you know, that these things have to cover or close cover. You know, we're not talking counting pennies here, but they have to pay for itself.
right,
It's with, you know,
or reasonably close.
right, reasonably close, you know, but we're not looking to make money on these activities. So we are looking to cover ourselves on them. You know, and if we're off a little, we're off a little, because somebody would tell you, oh, 1 year we made money for the pool. You know, that's not true. But nevertheless, that's why I asked you about those numbers when I came in, because I'm trying to work on that.
Okay.
This is very efficient. This has been great. And so
Well,
What
like I
do you-
said,
What do you need from us to
well,
be ready either before the next
Yeah.
meeting or ready to talk at the next meeting?
I think if you guys have any other comments on any of the assumptions. About anything and, you know, the truth is, if Matt, if you end up. If there is a decision taken to raise service fees. Just know that that's gonna flow to the bottom line and we're gonna have to put that money somewhere in some form of reserves. So I think you should just think about that because where they go. You know, do you want that extra money to go to the special capital fund? Do you want it to go to the reserve, this rainy day fund and get to the 12 months faster? So just be thinking about that because I will say that the unencumbered reserves is particularly, it's a little bit higher than the 2 months operating expense that we typically target for fiscal year 25. So we could, in theory, make that rainy day fund closer to the 12 months this year. But it all depends on if you reevaluate the service fees and how much that generates. I don't know, this could end up being just
And
a handful of
I don't
thousands.
expect we'll get to that by next Monday.
yeah, I think, let's see what the updated fee structure looks like.
Yeah,
Can I ask a couple of questions, I guess? I don't know if this is the right time.
Let's go.
But okay, so for the supplies and signs, 68104. It says that this year we have a number of 15,848,
Yep.
but have we spent that on anything?
No, not yet. So right now we've spent about $4,000.
On the street stuff?
Yeah.
So we've gotten 16,000 that's in there,
Yeah,
and then also for next year too.
next year and the year after, yeah.
Okay, and then. Did we have, you know, I know that the Public Safety Committee is really, gung ho on, adding a sidewalk to the end of Cumberland. And, I'm sure that's gonna be a bigger lift. Is that money allocated as part of the street?
Yes, it is. It is currently.
Okay.
So, what I had recommended as part of it, so this could also be, if you wanted to take a deeper dive, this could also be part of, next week's discussion, if you wanted to more in-depth discussion of committee and my requests that are mostly capital expenses. But the idea there was that, the Public Safety Committee, yes, has recommended a new sidewalk. My recommendation for that is to hire a long story short is, yes, I did include that in the budget. In terms of sequencing, my recommendation would be to use some of the money that's budgeted to hire a firm to help us with a study for it, because I think there's hidden costs there in terms of a survey that would be needed. I think doing the actual engineering of where it is, looking at where trees are relative to where the sidewalk would be treated.
Is it essentially like, is it like, you know how on this part of Cumberland, the town owns like, the side.
Yes.
But on that bottom part of Cumberland, do
Where's
the
the right of way?
homeowners
Yeah.
make?
It's
own
so there, it is tricky. So number one, it's the same as here in a lot of ways, that it is still the town right of way. What we would need to do is a survey to determine exactly where that is. But to your point, there's what is legally the town right of way, and then there's sort of what people think of as their property and have maybe made improvements there that's
For a long time.
so
Yeah.
what I have in the budget, actually, the Public Safety Committee, Kumar, if you're still there, kudos. Did a very good job in terms of getting a dollar amount that was close to
Yeah.
about what I would ask them. So they requested about $150,000 for it. I then called around to different firms that would help us do it, and I actually put in 154,000, so it's very, very close, but
From a budget perspective, we have the fund,
yeah,
but from a policy and process perspective, we have to figure out.
How that would all work, but it's in there right now.
it's in there, and then, yeah, as Councilmember Kumar said, it's then it's a question from your end of how do we sequence it, how do we move forward with it? And that goes back to then what Ann was also talking about, which is we have that special capital fund in the budget, partially to cover contingencies that we just don't know. So it might cost us an extra $50,000 to do the survey. We've put that in the budget. And in out years, if next year is all about doing the survey, doing a review of trees there, mapping it out, getting a plan so that in the following year, we actually implement it. We have a special capital fund there to reflect that, even if we don't know what the dollar amount is right now.
Okay, and then what about that study that was done to see if the pool parking lot was safe? I know they came up with an idea. Do we have money to implement that in this budget?
Yes, we do. That's also included in the budget. So, and this is also tentatively very, very short discussion, but on the work session agenda later tonight.
Oh, I should have read the agenda.
But in essence, there were some more kind of comprehensive improvements that they recommended. Because of the work being done at the pool, we just weren't able to get to it this year. But I think there are some things that we can do to help improve the flow of traffic and parking in the parking lot this year that we can implement almost as a pilot to then
Yeah,
put in place the full recommendations
It
next
actually
year.
makes more sense to do a sort of pilot than to, and I read their plan, than to do that, just to see, what the reaction is. Do people really walk on the right side of the road? We can talk
Yeah.
about this later,
yeah,
but I think it makes a lot of sense to do a pilot.
But then, to answer your original question, yes, it's in the budget for next year, so that if we do decide, yeah, we like this plan, it's
Okay.
what's.
I
it's a
would just
safe-
say, I did ask, because I saw that in the budget and I asked Matt Zapp what it was, and he said, I have no idea.
Okay.
Full committee chair, so I just think there might be a need to cycle back. I mean, you're on the full
He
committee.
knows- He's been pushing for this. He probably didn't know, maybe he never read the report from the company that did it, and then, but he isn't actually what he's been asking for.
We,
For
the
it to
study
move
just got back, we have
Yeah,
to get back.
Okay,
But just as a process, Shannon, on last year, for committee requests, we created a format. They all come in a standardized format on the whole, there are a couple of outliers. And then what Matt has been doing is, sometimes like Kumar Vasmani with his estimates, he was pretty, thorough. But often that's not the case, your people are sort of saying, hey, I want this, and this is 20,000 or 50,000. Matt has been actually benchmarking that. And because this is the budget committee request, that anything that goes in the budget has to be clearly benchmarked or based on historical goals. Because otherwise we are, not accurately budgeting fundamentally.
right,
So as a result, this year, we've been able to take in these requests in a much more sophisticated.
Yeah, right. I just want, I mean, if we're paying for these studies and, all the stuff, I just want to see them.
The outcome of that,
implemented.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, totally,
Plan.
totally.
Okay.
But I think, just to wrap up your question, Steve, that I think that if everybody wants to look at the line item and find these little things that either don't make sense or don't seem right, I think feed that into Matt so that he can do another version, and then maybe next meeting we can review that.
So we'll feed it to you.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
That would be perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I think if there's, to the extent that any benchmarking can be done between now and then on the fees, maybe unlikely, you've got your hands full, but, we could also,
We can also incorporate that.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I think we could start with the sensible route of the RDF.
yeah,
First step, and then let's discuss this group.
yeah, because you guys, they'll
Yeah,
just see what needs to be put where.
as in, if we are taking more revenue, let's put it into the RDF, and then we can look at it on Monday.
Just consider how blessed we are when we're paying hard to think about where to put extra revenue.
Exactly.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Exactly, we are very blessed.
Like I said, it's an efficient meeting because this is the least complicated it's been in years,
Yes,
so.
Thank you,
What-
Ann.
Question on the LED lights, street lights, have we had a bill in yet, so we get any sense of whether the lights are?
so that's,
If they're charging less for the LED lights.
Yes, I have to, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know that the last two bills we have. All of the Cumberland Dorset lights reflective of our lower wattage, so I can't remember off the top of my head.
But it's going down.
But it's, yes,
That's
it's,
about a third of the final.
it,
Oh, that's great.
yes, yeah, so there's. We save on two levels because number one is just we're using less electricity. But then also baked into the cost of every bill every month isn't operating and maintenance costs. And so that's also significantly lower per light. So as we finish that project as well, our bills should also go down.
Thank you very much.
All right, anything else? Otherwise, I'm gonna let you guys continue on with your
thank you, Ann.
meeting. Very much.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks,
It's great.
Ann.
Yeah.
And the budget committee.
We can move on very quickly.
Thank you, John, as well, and thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Lynn. Very much.
Thank you guys.
I suggest a 2 or 3 minute stretch break.
Yes.
You wanna say anything this time?
Yeah, so I'm gonna just, I'm just gonna turn off the video as we take a 5-minute recess. And then we'll join back for the regular work session for all of our
Let's make it quick.
participants. Yeah, why not?
That's my motto for new meeting.
Okay, so it's just about 7.
Starting the long wall, so,
Yeah, 2 minutes ago.
okay, there we go.
Should be some guy coming on.
Okay.
Just keep your eyes out.
So just one scheduling note, Mr. President, I had mistakenly, not included an item that, Councilmember Barr had requested from the Environment Committee, which is the composting, so I've updated the drive for us to re-add the recommendation which you had. And I think, so we have, Chair Rubenstein here, as well as, I think somebody from, Compost Crew is gonna join us. So while we're waiting for the person from Compost Crew, I thought maybe I could just quickly go over the data policy resolution, since should be, I think, relatively straightforward. The town attorney had notified me that, the state actually mandates that municipalities adopt a data policy, and so Somerset had not yet done that. This basically follows pretty standard resolution and policy that the town attorney had already written for some of his other clients. So it basically says that we will follow our existing document retention policy for any electronic records, that will set in place very basic security measures to ensure that they are protected, and sets a standard notification and containment plan of action if there ever is any type of data or security breach. So before I turn it over to the town attorney, in case he wants to add anything, this would, in theory, be introduced at the April agenda. Our policy is usually to introduce even for resolutions and then adopt at the subsequent meeting. We have the option to adopt at the same meeting if we want to, but in any case, I don't know, Ron, if you wanted to add anything to the data policy discussion.
I'll just note that this state law results from an incident in Baltimore County where personnel records were disposed of by being boxed up and placed on the sidewalk. And they contain social security numbers and the like. So this state law just requires us to have a data security policy where we implement procedures we deem reasonable based on our makeup to protect against identity theft.
And we are kind of already ahead of the game because we do have the document retention policy. This is just specific to sensitive data.
Okay. Great, any questions? Otherwise, we'll just have one.
It was only an observation that, we're still very much paper-based in our office, and I think thinking it through long-term, you're not going to go to an electronic office in the next couple of years. You're leaving, so it doesn't matter to you, but still, I think the goal should be electronic office.
I had a similar point to Robin's, which is that should it say something about our website and access to information that could be accessible via our website? So, this is sort of, hey, I'm gonna lock the town hall doors, but there are other ways to get to information. So I'm wondering, should this policy reflect some of that, Rob?
Sure, yeah, that's certainly possible. This is pretty bare bones. So if you do have ideas on how to make it better, we could certainly do that. And
Okay, I can
I'm
send.
just trying to think of what information could be derived from the website.
I'm just wondering, should the website be part of this policy? And how information is posted online, and or how one could access the town's computing systems via the website. In my experience in other firms, that can be a point of breach. And so it would be good to reflect that, I suppose, in our policy.
The one good thing that's in the works right now is EJ's working with the Department of Defense to get us certification for to be Town of Somerset MD.gov.
So
And
then
so there is an
There's an
extra,
automatic compliance factor. there.
exactly.
Okay.
But if you or any council members have ideas specific to electronic data security, even including
It should be a separate document.
two-party or
It's two factors.
two-factor
Yeah.
authentication, for all town logins.
These days.
If I can send something separately about.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Let's see, do we have,
We're gonna start composting or do you want to wait?
we don't yet have compost crew, so I don't know, Barton, would you prefer to wait until they're here probably?
I'm texting them, so he said that they would be available, so. Yeah, they should be here, so it's up to you guys, what you, I mean.
You want to go through it without him, or do you want?
I mean, I expect that he should be arriving momentarily, so I think we can.
Yeah, let's wait for
Don't we have other things?
yeah,
We have other things.
So I don't know what's easy, maybe one of the items is the police program and the resolution to end it. Do you want to jump into that or wait until after composting in case that turns into a longer discussion, or?
There is some discussion to be had around it, I know, so.
So I was thinking, let's knock out the pool parking lot.
Okay.
We're starting to get to that during the budget, and that's separate from the PSC, right?
Yeah, so I did include the study for you as well in here. Basically, the bottom line is my recommendation. My recommendation is there might be some things that we can implement this year. The biggest change that was recommended in the report was actually to eliminate
on the left.
on the
Right.
right, if you're looking into the pool, the right.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was to avoid to redirect pedestrian traffic, so pedestrians are not crossing in front of cars, in essence. So shift the walkway to that right side. And their observation was, at least during the swim meet that they were there for, that there was enough overflow parking available either on the street or in the other available parking spots at the town pool, that the improvement in safety would be worth the reduction in spaces. Now, they also recommended several things that we could do, like a barrier to put there,
Planters.
planters. Yeah.
They can do, they recommended something more permanent long-term, but if you want a quick fix, you get some planters and you just block off those spaces. And the idea is, can we redirect the traffic? And I think it's gonna be very hard to do,
Yeah,
because people are gonna walk in off of Warwick. And then they're gonna have to cross over to do the pathway. So they draw, so you draw a walkway and then it sets you down. And it's a matter of changing what's been going on for the
Yeah.
past 60 years or something.
But it makes total sense, because that was the whole problem with it, is that, like, when you walk in on that side. Not only are those 3 cars there, but then you have another whole street where kids have to be careful that cars aren't turning to park down there. And so if we can redirect people to go down in that line, it is ultimately much safer for the kids, I think.
yeah.
I think it's certainly worth it.
And people are talking on their phones.
Put in those
Yeah.
planters, start off, paint it, and see how it
It
goes.
says he's on right now, but. Doesn't hear the news.
Is that him right there?
Do you want me to, maybe I can,
Here, it says he's on, but I can use the Zoom from the Somerset announcement thing, that there's a town work session tonight, email.
shoot me an email, Barton, and I will email, or I
I'll
can
just
check.
forward you the email I just got from them.
Okay.
I mean, most of the people enter on that
I'll
side,
Gmail.
but
Yeah, I think that's the challenge is, changing traffic patterns for pedestrians to make sure they're on the right
I
side.
think if we draw a walkway that leads to the other walkway, it will become obvious, but I think it has to be a walkway coming out of, that little path, towards the parking lot that takes you and then takes you.
Yep.
You know what I
Needs to
mean?
be clearly
It has
painted.
to be clearly painted, and then we'll need to do, a
And
little
safety
path.
barriers, and I think it's a very well thought.
Yeah,
And we'll see.
lanterns at the outside, so separate.
Yeah.
No parking lot is safe.
But
But
the
it's
study
fair.
that I read anyway said that they attended during the pool meeting and there was chaos during the pool meeting.
No pool,
Swim meet.
right.
And I was wondering whether we could somehow work with the county to get the school lot to be available as an auxiliary lot during swim meet.
It's too far away. People aren't gonna do it.
What, 2 blocks?
It's more than 2 blocks.
3
You're,
blocks.
it's,
It is, you're right.
and people aren't gonna do it. As a past swim team parent, I'll tell you, we always look for the closest spot. But nevertheless, we have what, 3
Home meets, yeah.
3
or,
home
yeah,
meets.
like-
that they even they based this on a home meet is, I think, ridiculous. They needed to be in their parking lot on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon. But their conclusion, I'm sure, would be the same, that we need to redirect the traffic. We've been
need to
talking about
segregate.
this for a long time at the full committee. And if we do it with planters, then we haven't made a big investment. And, we paint the lines, whatever that's gonna cost it. And then try it, we're being proactive about safety, and we've been crying about this for a long time, so.
Right, and we've already presented the report. Do we need to have a vote on this at a council meeting, or can we just agree to proceed?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think any specific action is needed. I think the only other thing I thought of is that given the time crunch, that we may have difficulty getting painting the lines before so one alternative is this year to take away those 3 spots on the left, so there's at least not cars backing up from 2 directions. It doesn't solve the problem of crossing in front of cars at the intersection. So it doesn't really address all of the concerns that were raised during the study, but it at least,
That is the most dangerous piece of it all.
yes.
The left
It's
turn.
it's the walkway that abuts those 3 spots. So you come into the pool parking lot and then you walk, in front of
Directly
those
behind
3 spots,
gigantic
then you
SUVs.
cross the, section of the parking lot, then you're on the bridge.
All right,
So the crossing is what Shannon was referring to is also dangerous. But then there's the 3 spots where people are backing up and kids are coming and so on and so forth. So at a bare minimum, if we take that away and make that safer.
Yeah, but if we don't put a barrier in, people still park there.
can we?
Yeah, we would have to
I
do
just
it in a
wonder
way.
one
that
thing.
parks.
Instead of debating it at this moment,
Yeah,
can we wait another month or so to see where the parking lot is, see where we are on the full renovation, and EJ, maybe you would take this on, this piece, to
Say no.
then to make a decision, are we going left or right, basically?
I agree.
But we should
Okay.
cut off some of the spots, but I wouldn't make that decision now because we could really speed up
Agreed.
and we can do the painting and do the planters and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, that sounds like a great.
So EJ, can we give this to you?
Thank you, EJ.
Thank you.
Okay, so.
And
ready
we
to
do
go on
have, yeah,
compost.
Dan Israel here from the compost crew. Thank you, Dan, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good evening, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Barton, do you want to introduce your recommendation of the committee recommendation?
Sure, I'm Barton Rubenstein, Chair of the Environment Committee, and I asked Dan to join us this evening. Presently, in communication with the compost crew, we have about 40% of our town residents presently enrolled in the compost program with compost crew. So that doesn't include, there's a lot of other people that have their own composting buckets at home that they're doing on their own, which is wonderful. That's like, plan A to do it that way, but not everyone wants to do that. So enter compost crew. And we've had a very successful program for a number of years now. And, as everyone might be aware, the food issue in our world, we we are getting rid of 30% of our food that we harvest, and it's being wasted, and it's a very valuable piece of material that can be used for topsoil and many other things that Dan can talk to. So towards that, our goal to be more sustainable, more carbon neutral, reusing our food scraps is a major contribution. It's not a small contribution. And I think the success story of Somerset is not only things that we've done here in the town, but we have also encouraged others and inspired other municipalities, not only locally, nationwide, to do similar things like banning the leaf blowers, LED lights, and we just recently, Montgomery County just signed on with the leaf blowers. So this composting issue and all the environmental things that we do, this is not just about our town, but we're actually setting an example and inspiring others to piggyback on our thoughts. So with that in mind, the committee spoke with Robin in attendance about the idea of how to encourage residents in a non-threatening way, in a way that encourages them and gives them an opportunity to not participate if they actively want not to participate by saying that. So many people are very busy with their lives and they would rather, they'll forget to respond and say, hey, yes, we do want to sign up, but I just forgot to do it last week because I've been out of town or whatever. So we thought of the idea to do it the other way around, to basically say we're gonna offer a composting program for everybody. But if you are insistent on not wanting to be a part of the program, then that is your option. Just please let the town manager know that. So that's what we're hoping to do. And then after 6 months' time, if we can check in, and I don't know the exact wording of our recommendation, but it's something to do with, if I think I was talking to Alan, who's also, and you can speak to this, if there are people who receive the bucket that are not using the service, it's like an empty bucket every week, then compost crew will do an adjustment. So I think that's pretty much the essence of what I wanted to share, and maybe.
Right, and timing, the idea of doing it around Earth Day this year was the thought to give Earth Day a little buzz in town.
Yeah, that's correct. So we were hoping to move forward with this as soon as possible, and we thought of the idea of doing it at the same time as Earth Day, which is April 22nd next month. And I did write an article. Oh yeah, thank you for that reminder, because the last thing I wanted to say was that at our next Environment Committee meeting, which is April 11th, Thursday, we're going to have a town Zoom forum where we're going to, it's like an educational forum where we're going to talk about both composting, and I think Alan's going to come to that from Compost Crew, and also about bees, because part of our pledge to the town was that we were going to have educational programs related to the installation of the apiary. So that's what's going to happen next month. And in it, we're just going to, it's going to be educational, but we're not going to, it's going to be in the town journal also that this is going to happen, but we haven't said like, the town is committed to doing this composting program for all, because obviously you guys have not voted on that yet. But I just wanted to tell you that we're doing our part in our promise to the town council as far as education is concerned.
One point of slight correction, the food waste, if it's not composted and goes to a landfill, generates methane, not carbon dioxide. And methane is very much more potent, very much more potent forming gas than carbon dioxide. It's 30 to 100 times more warming in the short term. By short term, I mean 100 years. In other words, it takes 100 years to break down methane. Carbon dioxide takes thousands of years to break down. So it is a very good idea to reduce methane that we're putting into the atmosphere. And one way to do it is to increase the number of people who are composting.
Yeah. And to your point, they just launched a satellite into space to monitor methane being emitted all over the planet. So there's a lot of people that have said that their oil companies in particular say that they're capping their methane, but this is the most dangerous of all the greenhouse gases. So fortunately now we're gonna have a watch guard up in the sky.
Yeah, right. I'll just tell an amusing story of the Pleistocene era where there were large mammoths around who were plant eaters, and they generated a lot of methane the old-fashioned way, or passing gas. But being very large, they passed a lot of gas. And they became extinct because early humans were hunting them and things like that. What happened after the methane went away was the temperature dropped by 10 degrees, and there was an ice age for 1,300 years following it. Now, methane is so potent that it changed the temperature on Earth when it was removed by 10 degrees. Now we have an ice age. Now we're in the reverse circumstance now. We're warming fast and we need to get rid of methane.
So then does the compost, does it go the same day as the trash?
Yes. Yes.
And I know I remember a couple of neighbors who do the program. I do not, which I should. But you know, they had said that there was very inconsistent pickup of it sometimes. Has that gotten better? Do you know?
It's gotten better. I mean,
It's a-
personally, I've had no problems. You know,
I think it was maybe new households that were signing up or
You
something.
you know what? I've had many problems. And when I do it, I just write to the compost crew and they fix them. But yeah, it's been, for some reason, everybody on the block but me gets picked up and it's like, why me?
Right.
You know, and I write them and they come back and get it. I love the idea of this town doing this. I call myself a crazy composter. I will take things that my husband puts in the garbage out just to put into the compost. I think it's a great program, but here's my fear with, I think people need to sign up for it. Because otherwise they're not gonna make a commitment. If we say opt out instead of opt in, and we put buckets at everybody's door, I'm afraid they're not gonna do it, and there'll be no way to really account for the people that aren't, because the guys that come along and pick up, they're
Right.
pretty fast. You know, they come, they do their job, you know, they take their compost, they run to the next house and they run.
right.
I don't think, they don't have a little clipboard that's gonna say, oh, house at 4803 Fallstone, they have not had their compost out for weeks.
But I mean, to your point, and I think that's actually what I was hoping Dan could address is the idea of if we delivered a lot of buckets to people that just forgot to opt out and call in, and they're not using it for a month or two, that you guys would make that adjustment and then basically take away their buckets. Why don't you speak to that, Dan? If you would, please.
Sure. If you don't mind, I'll just take one step back and say, first of all, the compost crew really appreciates the opportunity to work with Somerset. We have now been working with the town for coming up on 5 years to get as many as 200 homes composting. So thank you for the opportunity. We're excited about the possibility of continuing that work and perhaps expanding it. You've definitely inspired a lot of neighboring villages and towns. When Somerset started, I think it's probably the second or maybe the third municipality in the area that was composting, and now we're closing in on 20 municipalities in the area that are composting their food scrap. So I don't think it's understatement, Barton, to say that what you've done has inspired people to copy and offer the same services to their residents. And particularly, as people move around and they had composting service and then they move somewhere where they don't have it, they're more likely to contact their local official and say, hey, can you give us the service that we had before? But to your question about, how do we track? We don't have a clipboard, but the driver does have a tablet in the truck. And so we have an app that gives them direction on every house that they should be collecting from. And so we log where the bins are out and where the bins aren't out and where the bins aren't found. And my apologies that sometimes you're the only house on the block that doesn't get corrected. We'll make sure that we pay closer attention to that one. But we would be able to generate a report that shows you over a period of time that we would agree, whether it's a month or 2 months or 3 months, like here's the participation by household. Like these houses have it out 100% of the time, and these ones are doing pretty well, 70, 80%. But here's the list of homes that are at 0% or they're at under 20% participation, which would give you the opportunity to reach out to them and say, hey, you're not using the bin. Do you want to be part of the program, or should we take you off the list?
That's good. If you can, if you can track like that, then I'm all for it.
Do you,
Yeah.
what do you recommend as far as how frequently you would give the town an update as to? I mean, obviously, things are gonna get going probably a little slower than, I don't know, what are your thoughts about like every 2 weeks or
I'd say
So-
month.
every month?
We already provide monthly reporting to the town about how many people have signed up that month, how many total people are participating. We would be able to just add a few details, I think, to that monthly report. And then it would be up to you to make a decision about how quickly you want to act on that information. I would agree, like deciding to kick people out after 1 month might be premature. You might want to like knock on their door or send them an email or call them and educate them a little bit about the benefits of composting and try and get them to do it. But that would be up to you to set the guidelines about when you would remove people from the program.
There might be some peer pressure here. The more and more, bins are out that people go, gee, I should do it. I
Right.
got the bin, I should do it.
And then, and to Dan's point, we're gonna do this education forum of on the 11th, and let's say if, you guys vote in April sometime, so that if you decide to vote and go ahead with this, then we can make sure that we do follow up as an environment committee to, put some announcements, town of Somerset announcements or.
I think you should do a video, like how easy it is, that should go out to everyone that you click on and you can just watch someone like composting.
Yeah,
And like, we're gonna drop it off at your house and this is how easy it is and,
okay.
composting for dummies,
I
like
like that
me,
idea.
like me.
And
Maybe
also,
we'll do it together.
Yeah,
and also, Barton, many of us have little bins on our counters.
Right,
So then we just take our little bin out
Right.
to where our composting bin is.
that's what we do too.
no, I meant not me do the video, but
No,
speak to someone like,
You're
like,
No,
you're
no,
speaking
no.
to me, cause I don't know how to do it.
Does the compost crew have videos already?
You got any videos, Dan?
We do certainly have some videos. Yeah,
Yeah, could be useful.
Okay, maybe can you share some with me?
sure. Of course. We'll send you some links to what you can find.
If I ask you a question, then we need to move on. First off, thank you for joining us. The cost, this is an expensive. It's an expensive program, and we're talking about almost effectively doubling the cost of the program.
Right.
So I guess my one question I have is there any unit cost reduction? I mean, if you're picking up a bucket at every house on the street, it seems to me that that's much more efficient for your team. And there should be a cost reduction to the town to pay for it.
So,
Yep.
yes, that is good logic. However, the other thing to take into consideration is that the current pricing that you have is 5 years old. And so there will be some increase in rates, which might be partially offset by a lower per home price as you get into the higher number of homes participating.
Okay.
So this has been a 5-year contract?
So we're coming up on a contract renewal.
Yeah. Yeah, a question about that is, I know that there's like a bidding process that the town must go through, or how do you
Yep.
renew? Can you just explain it, because I think Alan mentioned to me that, they want to know whether, are they gonna continue, or do you have to like do the whole?
Yeah, definitely. We'll reach out to you specifically, Dan. It will probably look very similar to what you had done before, and we'll just tweak it to update, as things have changed over the last 5 years, but we will reach out directly to you. Then we also post on our town website. We post through MML and on the Maryland e-procurement site, whatever that's called. So
Right.
So
And it's anything above 20K,
15.
15K has to be bid out. Anything that's above
Okay.
15,000 is the procurement
Right.
rule of the town.
But would you say that the compost crew has some sense of confidence that they might have a contract again, or?
Well, ultimately, the council votes to approve any contracts. I mean, I just off the cuff, there's not a lot of service providers for composting, so. That certainly factors into it. I think generally people have been happy with Compost Crew, a few issues here and there notwithstanding, but. I think that,
I'll add to that, Compost Crew has won the county contracts for its pilot program. So they are very successful bidders in competitions locally.
Right. And to your, can I just say one last thing? I know you want to, but I think, my goal personally is that, we get the whole town to compost, but also push the county to take this on as their baby. So I don't necessarily see this as a long-term commitment.
The county's working on it.
Alright,
I see.
And I'm on the county committee that is working on it, but the problem is where we put the stuff. And that's the challenge for the county right now, is finding a place to compost material, or places to compost material.
One last
question, we were just discussing the budget for next fiscal year, and this is a line item in the budget. But it sounds like you're saying we should launch this fiscal year. I just wanted to clarify. Because, okay, because then it would mean that we are using funds from this fiscal year. And then I would go to the town manager and say, do we have the fund for this fiscal year, if that's what we want to do? But just so you know, for the next fiscal year, we were aligning that we should do it.
Right.
Okay.
Then that would have been starting July 1. So you could announce it, but we would be ready to deploy the funds July.
Well, this year, we are not fully using our operating budget, is that correct? And we have generated $350,000 extra in revenue this year.
No, but I would love to hear from the town manager if you think we can. Because then it would be a council decision to then reappropriate funds.
yeah, it would require a budget amendment. So it would impact, our bottom line of what was presented. But, the other factor to consider, as Councilmember Barr said, is we have a number of items that are under budget, so it
should be fine.
we could absorb this new cost and still be under our budgeted operating expenses for the year.
I wonder, since we've got this budgeted for July 1, if in the interim before July 1, what we do instead is get people to sign up before we make it a blanket, it's around the whole neighborhood, because it's not in this year's budget, and it would just be, I wonder if that would be easier for us and more prudent to do it that way. I don't know.
But it's not a sign up. This is the other way around.
I know, that's why until then, maybe the education is sign up, and then, in June, we say, okay, opt out, if you don't want to, I don't know.
On my end, I'm fine either way. I just wanted to make sure we understood that that's what we were doing here.
And just since we don't have the numbers right in front of us, it's right now, our monthly cost is a little under $2,700, and that's for 202 households. So in effect, you double that, you're talking about starting May, $5,500.
Change.
$5,500.
I didn't do the math.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I'm good.
Then the other question I have, is that when 2 years ago, when I went on to Compost Crew, I had to give my information to sign up, including my card information. And I wasn't, I was like, well, I don't want to pay for this. I don't want someone to hold my card information. So I didn't do it. This go around, that's not going to happen, right? When you operationalize it, Dan?
Yeah.
So you have different options in terms of how you would have your customers sign up.
Okay.
Some of our municipal partners have customers or residents sign up directly with us. And if they go through that sign up process, then we do require a piece of payment information. I can explain why in a minute.
Yes.
However, other of our municipal partners collect the signups themselves. And if you're doing an opt out, you would have a list of names and we would just add them to our system and we wouldn't have to collect the payment information.
And my preference to my recommendation to the council is we do the latter. And I think that would be better for residents. And actually, you'll probably get more opt-ins without them.
Yeah, I've heard that too, where people say they don't want to put in their credit card. Makes me
That's
wonder
good.
now, you have my credit card?
Yeah, that would certainly work fine for us.
Thank you, Dan, for sharing this information. Really appreciate it. Jumping on the call with about an hour's notice.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you all for the opportunity. We're excited to continue the rest of this year, and we'll look out for the procurement process, and I'm sure we will respond for the next contract.
Thank
Thank
you. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
So are we ready to push this through to our April agenda? for
Yes,
motion?
definitely.
All right.
You were good. Thank you, Barton.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Guys.
And everybody put out your compost tonight.
It's already out.
Mine's already out.
I even have the bigger can. I have the green.
I'm waiting for the instructions.
Take care, everybody.
Police program, resolution and existing program.
I don't know, Councilmember Roback, I don't know if you want to introduce it as the liaison, otherwise I'm happy to.
I thought we already introduced it.
So we introduced it, the public safety committee had a few recommendations. I thought the
introduced-
recommendations were good, just some
Yeah.
kind of word.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
word changes.
okay, so what do we have to do now then?
Nothing really, I mean, I think you could either motion tonight or in April before it's introduced, motion to adopt as. As recommended for amendment by the Public Safety Committee.
Okay, well, I think we should motion to adopt as recommended by the Public Safety Committee. Do we do that tonight?
Well, Ron, I guess, Ron, can you clarify that for us? So we introduced this resolution in in March. So it's anticipated for adoption in April. The Public Safety Committee has offered some recommendations to tweak it. I don't know if you have recommendations on sort of the best path forward for the council to incorporate these amendments.
Yes, and hopefully the collective memory will help out here. I recall discussing at the last meeting, because there was some interest in adopting it immediately, that I recall the council where we ended up is we wanted to lay it over for possible public comment, because to date, everyone's been in favor of termination, but we've not heard from anyone who might be in favor of keeping it. So we were going to allow additional time for that. But under the town policy, generally speaking, we introduce at one meeting, adopt at a second meeting. But that policy does say it's at the council's discretion. Some things like ceremonial resolutions, we adopt on the spot. And some things that we've discussed for multiple months, like this, could be adopted on the spot, but it's really up to the council.
If I can clarify for Shannon, I don't think we're talking about adopting it tonight.
No,
The
just,
question is, can we change the wording in the resolution tonight?
Absolutely, yes.
okay, that's what I meant. That
But
we should change the wording.
change the wording after it's been introduced, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
the question.
It's public-
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it could be reintroduced tonight at the work session.
I see, okay, that's good. Okay, so we reintroduce.
So do you want to say we'll reintroduce it with the modifications as recommended by the public safety committee?
So then when it's included, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so we're good. So we
Second,
that's fine.
All in favor, aye. Okay.
So when it's then included in the packet and for public consumption, it will be updated to include these amendments.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
great.
Perfect. So that was smooth. Okay. Safety task force, pedestrian safety task force. We want task force members. Sorry.
Aren't we talking about is making another committee almost?
Well, is it? I prefer not to have another full
Because
committee.
we have
I think this would be
two
like
committees already.
Right, this would be
It's
a
getting
group of-
all together, all of the committees, because like every committee kind of has like a little bit of stake in it, is from what I.
Right, so it would be asking for a representative from every committee with an
Yeah.
interest to be a member of the task force.
And
So
who's going to run this task force?
we could. I don't know, they could select their own chair, or alternatively, we could ask the public safety committee chair to chair it.
Okay. I just think we are so slim in terms of participants on committees and things that we need to be Be careful, it needs to
This
have a
would be using
beginning and an
current
end.
Committee members for a limited term task force.
And Kumar is, you know, he's emailed and gotten the buy-in from most of the committees so far.
You know, when this was the email we recently received, right, from Mr. Vaswani. And there were maybe 6, 7 items that the task force covered. It seems like some of them are already on the docket of the town manager and the town staff. So it would be good to finalize what the list would be that this working group or this task force would focus on, because some of them are ongoing work, I think, of the town staff. Was when I looked at it, so that's one quick.
Right, I wondered about that.
Yeah, it's taking like all the things that we had kind of talked about, like at one point we were talking about, you know, people whose plantings are covering the street signs or, you know, not making a very big right of way. So someone to go through and start looking at these and start documenting these, because I don't know that that those things have happened, you know, so it's making sure that when there is a crack in the sidewalk or, you know, that it's replaced efficiently and quickly. And so that kind of stuff is kind of one tier of it. And then the second tier is really how do we like ADA, you know, qualified for our sidewalks in general.
You know,
Sounds more like a public safety thing to me, to be honest.
well, on balance, if our town staff are not delivering on those, which are, then we would want them to deliver on those. Would be my, instead of the task force. However, there are items on that list, like the ADA was one, and the Cumberland sidewalk is also on
Right.
that list. That actually could benefit from a focus group attention that would be outside the purview of the town staff, so.
Or contribute to the town.
And
contribute
there's
to that.
another area where there isn't a sidewalk, but I can't remember. Is it on Trent?
Essex.
Ethics, okay,
The dead end of Essex, yeah.
got it.
So that would be, you know, that could be useful for a specialized group to focus on, whereas these other tasks could be. You know, I mean, if they've not happened, you know, I look to the town manager that make sure they happen.
Didn't we have a study on sidewalks? Did they not give
It
us
was
a
the
rec-
street one.
I think the point is that it hasn't, these things have been raised, issues have been identified, but they haven't all been executed in a timely manner, or they haven't happened. And so there's sort of a desire for it to happen in a timely manner. But I think the question for me would be, do we want that all in the task force, or do we want some specific items in this task force? If folks are energized, frankly, to come together and go for it, we should, you know, empower them to do it.
Well, maybe what they do is they start out and then it becomes clear that this is really something the town is already working on, and this is something the town we should hand to the town and.
Ideally, it should be, right? We wouldn't want private residents to be going around telling other residents to cut their.
Right,
You know,
right, yeah.
that's what I'm mainly concerned about, that it would become this, we have just empowered a specialized group to go and tell others to, you know. Fix their overgrown yards.
I mean, that's a challenge of fun, and Matt has been working on it, and in fact, I've seen some effect of your work.
I have actually,
So,
that's what I was.
Thank you. But in Kumar's 19-page memos, sorry.
I read every page.
It does mention that the town is working on some of these things in that memo, but I think we do need a pedestrian safety working group for other recommendations. I mean, the things I've noticed myself, walking in Chevy Chase Village, they have much better signage as a school in Chevy Chase Village than we have in Somerset for our school. They talk about fines doubled during school hours on a sign there. We've got nothing like that.
We don't give out fines, so.
Right, so I mean, that's the
Or
kind
like,
of
but
thing.
even like Drummond, you know, has like that nice new crosswalk across
Yes, they
that
do the ladder
alley.
cross.
Yeah, the ladder crosswalk, that kind of
And we
stuff.
have none of those. But the point is, let's get some folk gathering all that together and recommendation.
So it sounds like we're all in agreement that this is a worthwhile pursuit. How do we, maybe this is a question more for Ron, what's the best way or an effective way for us to stand up and direct this group or empower this group to do some studies, walk around, get some information and make some recommendations?
Yeah, I think a walk around the town and document how many instances of right-of-way growth are an issue would be important. We had a similar project in Martin's Additions a few years ago. I'm trying to remember how that proceeded.
If I might offer one thought, Ron, and maybe you could respond to that and the council might have thoughts as well. So one is just that I think our chart, I don't know if a working group is different than a committee in terms of where it needs to originate from. Whether that's the mayor or the council can do that. But then thinking about some of our more successful committees, they've had a charter that had very specific mission statements essentially for them. And so maybe one possibility would be for the staff to in coordination with maybe Mr. Vaswani to create a draft mission statement for.
I think that's a
For
great
the-
idea.
That's perfect.
I was looking for a little bit of structure that would help.
That's perfect.
That might be sufficient.
I mean, I think working groups are limited terms, so we could set the term of the working group to 2 years or whatever. Like the stormwater committee, remember?
Right,
I think that's what he was. Yeah.
Great, okay. We'll take you up on that.
cool, okay.
Thank you. So that brings us to. Check on the agenda again. That's it.
Oh, no,
No,
I'm
so
sorry.
there's one more. Isn't there?
Yeah, there was a memo from the Public Safety Committee about repairing.
Sidewalk repairs and
Sidewalks.
tree trimming. Oh, I thought that was sort of part of the task force, but it's separate. Okay, that's my bad. So, yeah. So this is something that the towns, as you were stating, the town staff is already empowered to work on this, so. What else do you need? Are there any issues? Do you disagree with any of these recommendations?
I have a suggestion. Why don't, I mean, you won't be here. The next working session. Will you be here? So it'd be good maybe for the next working
That was the
session.
note if we can help.
Yeah, to get a rundown of where things stand on. The sidewalk repairs and, just to kind of give us a real rundown of that.
That's a great idea, thank you.
Because as Robin noted, you have been working on it.
Okay.
And it gives folks 4 weeks to catch up. And some falling behind.
Okay. Great. Are there any other topics for discussion tonight?
We're meeting next Monday night just to do budget. right?
Yes, I actually sent in calendar invite to you all, so it's scheduled, it's a 1 hour scheduled work session. From 5:30 to 6:30 next Monday.
Either of B square guys.
And it's gonna generate the fee comparison.
Yeah, I'll present some fee information for you and recommendations. I would also say if anybody in looking through has recommendations that they want incorporated ahead of the meeting, if you could get them to me by Wednesday, ideally, Thursday, I could send out on Friday to you, so that then they can be incorporated and part of the,
So Wednesday close of business, get feedback to you.
that would be ideal, yeah.
Yeah,
Or I will send it out on Thursday, so I would say,
You will send the draft out.
I'll send a new
You can
draft.
send the draft out again on Friday, right? We're okay with that.
It's up to you,
Okay.
whatever's,
This will
whatever's.
give the council more time to get you feedback
Yes,
by Wednesday. Then you have a day to turn it around.
Perfect.
Okay. Because I think we made good progress there
Yes.
already, yeah.
Great, thank you all very
Great,
much.
thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Early.
10 minutes early.
Whoa, not bad.
Bye, Ron, thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ron. Motion to adjourn.